Tithing in the law. God took his people out of Egypt and inserted them into the Promised Land, establishing an independent nation with all the formalities, including its own religion. The Eternal knew that he would need separate and qualified people to manage the entire system. These people were the public servants of the time, that is, people whose jobs were to serve the population as a whole and not their own specifically. Evidently, at that time we did not yet have all the systems formed like today: health systems, security, education and all the others. What God organized was a religious system with all its officials. As in all countries, society itself is the one who supports and pays the salaries of its public servants and benefits from their services. It would be no different with Israel. Who would support its religious system with its officials? Certainly there is only one answer, and for this God institutes a taxation system to raise funds. And this system is called tithes and offerings. Due to the theme and context experienced by the contemporary church, we will only focus on tithes that were obligatory and not on voluntary offerings. The sacred books that validate the law of tithes are exactly the first 5 of the Bible, called Torah or Law. The main passages on the subject are in Leviticus chapter 27, 30-34, Numbers 18, 21-32, Deuteronomy chapter 12, chapter 14, 22-29 and chapter 26, 12-15. It is important to read them all. We will only read specific excerpts for time reasons. It is interesting to define the term and practice of tithing before proceeding. Its definition is simple: tithe literally means tenth, whereas its practice was to give God a tenth of what he demands. Note that it was not what the Jew wanted to give, but what God determined, and this could not be changed by anyone. What many do not even imagine is that in the law there were at least 3 types of tithes. 1. The first, scholars call it tributary, theocratic, government, Levitical or sacred tithe. Leviticus chapter 27, 30 and 32. Also all the tithes of the land, both from the grain of the field and from the fruit of the trees, are the Lord's. They are holy to the Lord. Concerning the tithes of the cattle and the flock, of everything that passes under the shepherd's staff, the tithe will be holy to the Lord. This tithe was given to the Levites and priests for their service to the temple and the congregation, so the Jews were supporting the theocratic system of government, that is, the system in which the priests were the rulers under the authority of God. The people gave their tax tithe to the Lord, but gave it to the priests. 2. The second is called the community tithe or party tithe. Deuteronomy chapter 12, 10, 11, 17 and 18. But you shall cross the Jordan and dwell in the land which the Lord your God will make you inherit. And he will give you rest from all your enemies around you, and you will dwell in safety. Then there will be a place that the Lord your God will choose to make his name dwell there. To that place you shall bring everything that I command you. your burnt offerings, and your sacrifices, and your tithes, and the offering of your hands, and every choice of your vows made to the Lord. In your cities, you may not eat the tithe of your grain, nor of your wine, nor of your oil, nor the firstlings of your herds, nor of your flocks, nor any of your votive offerings, which you have promised, nor your offerings voluntary, nor the offerings of your hands. But you shall eat it before the Lord your God in the place that the Lord your God will choose, you, and your son, and your daughter, and your manservant, and your maidservant, and the Levite who lives in your city. And before the Lord your God you will rejoice in everything you do. Despite being something festive and wonderful, this tithe was also mandatory. Everyone should go to Jerusalem year after year and, together with the Levites and the whole family, eat meals before the Lord, expressing gratitude and communion. 3. The third, I call it, tithe of charity or tithe for the poor. Deuteronomy chapter 26:12. When you have finished setting aside all the tithes of your harvest in the third year, which is the year of tithes, then you will give them to the Levite, the stranger, the orphan and the widow, so that they may eat within your cities and be satisfied. This tithe, also mandatory, was given every 3 years. As the text states, the produce had to be deposited in their cities for the Levite, the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. It was a tithe for others, in order to contribute to the nation's welfare system. Someone may ask, but isn't this tithe the same as the first? Isn't that what supports and sustains the priestly system of the Levites? The answer is simply no. In this case here, the Levites were those who were not members of the priesthood, which could include a retired priest or another person who is a member of the tribe of Levi but who did not have any land inheritance. Therefore, annually every Jew was obliged to pay 23% of all his income in the form of tithes. 10% of the tax tithe given to the Levites. 10% of the community or festive tithe, and every 3 years the charitable tithe, which divided results in a total of 3.5% per year. Adding 10% plus 10% and 3.5% more, we arrive at a total of 23.5%. A value very different from the 10% so sacred and preached by current modern churches. Would we really like to live the Old Testament tithing system? But there is another detail. It doesn't end there, there is more. In my studies, I still find 2 other obligatory tithes, that of harvests, where every Jewish settler must leave corners of the field for those in need to harvest and have something to eat. Its record is found in Leviticus chapter 19, 9 and 10, and its practice in the book of Ruth. The other is the sabbatical, 1 year in every 7, where each Jew must give up the harvest and any and all charges. Check out Nehemiah chapter 10.31. There were also voluntary offers that I did not work on in this study. However, it is also important to understand them. Later in another series one will talk about them. Making a parallel between Israel's tithe system and the taxation systems of most modern countries, we will see that just as Israel was obliged to support its public servants, provide assistance to its poor, orphans and widows, so too are taxes currently charged by the competent authorities. And just as those who did not pay these taxes were considered thieves, as they were withholding what was established by law as taxes, today if someone is caught evading taxes, it is considered a crime punishable by penalties including imprisonment. When God instituted for the nation of Israel to give tithes of their crops, fruits and flocks, that is, of their riches, the original purpose was to signify an important idea, expressed in Exodus chapter 19. 5. Now therefore, if you will diligently obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you will be my treasured possession above all people. For all the earth is mine. The spirit of the law here was that they had no right to use anything, because everything belonged to God. So the point was that by giving the first 10% to God, It was a way of signifying that everything they had belonged to him, and the portion given was a way of acknowledging that truth or reality. Therefore, the expected attitude was for the Jews to give tithes with gratitude and reverence to God, recognizing that everything they possessed came from him. Although it was a religious obligation, the donation of tithes should be done with joy and devotion.